June the 14th, 2020. Welcome to today's lesson, the fellowship class of the First Baptist Church of Mount Vernon. And I want to thank you for taking the time to listen and watch. Special thank you real quick here to Lanny Ramsey, the leader of our class, the judge, and for allowing us teachers to teach. And thanks to Ridley Briggs, Lynn Lowry, they teachers that have taught, and they do an excellent job. And sometimes I feel less than adequate after watching them teach. And of course, I want to thank Andy Jones, the man that makes all this happen. Without him, you wouldn't be seeing or hearing me. So most of all, you for watching. So hope your week has been pleasant, productive. And I hope each of you have God's, I love this word, shalom, God's peace. It's a Hebrew word, and it means fulfillment, God's complete fulfillment for you, complete contentment. And so I hope you've had that, particularly in these troubled times that we've had in the last week or so. And I want you to know that God is in control, and this time shall pass. So keep that in your heart as you think about what we talk about today. The lesson today is in Proverbs. Proverbs, 3rd chapter, verses 1 through 12 are what we will be concentrating on. And the lesson title really is Direction Offered. And based on what Lynn covered in last week's lesson, you know that Proverbs is one of the Jewish wisdom literature books. Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, the Song of Songs, those are considered wisdom literature. And of course, Proverbs is that. So we look at these Proverbs, and in Hebrew, they are called Mishlei. Now, Mishlei, Mishlei, is a Jewish word for sayings, proverbs, wisdom sayings, and that's what it means. They're written, Proverbs is written to be general instruction. They're not meant to cover every exception. And as we know, there are thousands and thousands of exceptions to everyday situations in life. So these are general instructions, and they were general instructions that used to teach people during the times of the Old Testament of righteous living, a way to correctly live. So you'll go through the book of Proverbs and you'll see these teachings. They are collections of ways to live righteously. So you'll see that as you go throughout the book of Proverbs, and that's what they were used for. Now, what we want to do is we're going to examine verses 1 through 12. We're going to have to treat them as couplets. And what that simply means is generally the first verse, verse 1, will be the instruction on what to do. Verse 2 will be, if you do this, then this is what will happen, generally speaking. So we're going to treat these as couplets and cause and effect, basically. If you do this, then this will happen. We're going to treat it as couplets, and I want you to keep in mind that these are general. They're not specific in nature, not meant to be, but they're general overall principles for living a godly life. So with that said, let's get into the lesson. What I intend to do is go ahead and I'll read the verse, and then I'll pick out key phrases or words that I want to spend a little time on. Now, just before we do that, I want to tell you that I'm using a variety of sources, and I want to encourage you to use as many sources and versions of the Bible as you can. Don't limit them to particularly just any form of the New King James or the King James. I'll be using the Complete Jewish Study Bible, which is a Messianic study Bible. I'll be using the New King James Version, the New American Standard. I'll be using the New Century, and I'll be using the Torah which is from the Jewish Virtual Library. Now, the reason I do that is because sometimes some of these words that we take for granted as you examine their Jewish roots take on a whole new life. It blossoms, it gives new meaning to something. And we'll see that in a couple of these verses in here. So keep that in mind. I encourage you to do that. So let's look at verse 1. Verse 1, my son, don't forget my teachings. Keep my commands in your heart. Now, a couple of things here. Don't forget. That implies you know it, doesn't it? You can't forget something you don't know. So right off the bat, don't forget. You need to know God's commands. You need to spend time with the Bible. If you don't know it, how can you forget it? Seems kind of simple, but I need to mention that. So, second thing is keep my commands in your heart. The heart, and I'll mention this probably later, was considered the center of the soul. And it really, if you look at some of the wording of that particular verse, it really means embed them in your heart. There are some things you have embedded in your heart, don't you? Do you know when your birthday is? It's embedded. You'll never forget that and until you lose your memory. Do you know your anniversary? There are some dates and some things that are embedded in your heart. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about in Proverbs. That's what God is saying is keep them embedded in your heart so you will never forget. Verse 2, for they will add to your many days years of life and peace. Now here was the command. Here's what will happen if you follow it. Okay? The emphasis here, you tend to read it and you think, well, this is length. Means I'm going to be really. That's not really what we're talking about. We're really talking about, the emphasis here is on years of life and peace. Not merely time, not merely length of days, but the fullness that you have, the fullness of that life. You've heard jokes about people die on their deathbed saying various things about how I wish I'd spent more time doing this or that and the other. Well, what this is saying is basically don't get to the end of your life and say, I've led an empty life. Make your life full. Make every day count. And if you live it according to God's commandments, every day will be full of life. It will count. It will be full of that God-given peace that you deserve as a child of God. Now, that's what it means. How long will you live? That's up to the good Lord to determine that. He knows that. He knows when it'll happen. So don't be concerned with that. Be concerned with those days you have to fill them with what He wants. Now, I want to tell you also that it does not imply that those who do not live by those will have sickness or shorter lives. It does not imply that. So don't think that. Again, it is the quality of the time that you have. Life, years of life and peace, shalom. I want to touch on that. That is probably my new favorite word, shalom. It is not only a greeting, but is, as I said, it's a word, a Hebrew word that is intimately associated with God. It's not just a secular word. It's intimately associated with God. It means, shalom means God's fullness, God's completeness, God's satisfaction be on you. That's what it means. It's much deeper than just a hello or goodbye. And that's really important. It's saying if you do this, your days are going to be full. They're going to be full of contentment. You'll still have trials and troubles and persecutions, but it will be full of contentment, and you will have God's peace. Let's go to verse 3. Do not let grace and truth leave you. bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Now, couple of things. Bind them around your neck. Now, that's grace and truth. We know what those are. Those are characteristics. And what this verse is telling us is bind them around your neck. Now, I'll show you something here. These set of dog tags. These happen to be my dog tags. But wear them around your neck. We wear these for the purpose of identification and information on them. But now if I had a woman's necklace is to be worn around the neck. It's to be seen. So what you're hearing here is bind these grace and truth around your neck so that they can be seen. They need to be seen by others. But at the same time, have them to be something that you identify with, that identifies you. When you wear these and people see them, they say, oh, you're in the military, right? Yeah, you're right. Well, grace and truth need to be around your neck. They need to be seen, and they need to identify you. Just like that. The tablet of your heart. Heart was considered the center of the soul. And if there were a tablet, write it on your heart. Burn it into your heart if your heart had a tablet. That tells you how strongly grace and truth should be a part of your everyday makeup. Verse 4. Then you will win favor and esteem in the sight of God and of people. So grace and truth stays with you. It's bound to you like a necklace. Then if we live according to that, then God will approve of us. Now it follows that once God approves of us, people later will respect and esteem us. I've heard the expression, he was a godly man. And that is because that individual was displaying those traits of grace and truth, and people recognize it. But the important part is God will approve first, and then people. And you can see that it says in the sight of God first and the people. Always remember, you want to please God first, not people. Because people, God first, okay? Again, you see these cause and effect type verses. Do this, and this will happen. So let's go to verse 5. Trust in Adonai with all your heart. Now, Adonai is a Jewish word that's used, and it just means Lord, okay? Trust in Adonai with all your heart. Do not rely on your own understanding. Now, to me, this is the kind of the key phrase of these 12 verses. Trust. Let's talk about this for a minute. Trust. That word, the Hebrew word for trust is a word called batak, B-A-T-A-K. And there's also an allied word that's very close to it called batah, B-A-T-A-H. Now, if you look over in Deuteronomy 28:52, and you can do that later, but it refers, this root word for which we get trust, refers to the confidence that's placed in walls that are surrounding cities that protect them from invaders. It's synonymous with faith and confidence. But if you stop and think back, all the ancient cities had walls, and the walls were to protect them from outside invaders. And if you had confidence in your walls that they would keep everything out, then you could continue with your daily lifestyle. They would protect you. You could sleep at night in some sort of sense of safety and comfort. What this word means is something just something much more deep than just, I trust that chair is going to hold me when I sit in it. It's not going to fall apart. This is much deeper. It says you got to have faith and you have to have confidence, but it implies incorporating your life and your correct behavior of God into everything. That's what it means. It's much greater than just the English definition of trust. And if you think about it, failure to trust can be considered as conceited about our knowledge. We have let our knowledge override. And so it's extremely important. You understand what that means. Human intellect cannot begin to understand the mind of our eternal Father beyond what he has chosen to show us. Human intellect cannot begin to understand the mind of our eternal Father beyond what he has chosen to show us. And God has a plan for good for those who love the Lord. We know that. But there is a certain point at which our feeble minds, cannot understand the workings of God. And we need to accept that and move on. He has a plan even in today's world. Verse 6. In all your ways acknowledge him, then he will level your paths. It's just saying make God the number one consideration in your life. All the time, everywhere. Make him the number one consideration. And if you do that, probably make what he says is if you do that, then he will level your paths. And that means make your way in life more level. Now, I want you to understand what I'm saying here. Being more level means ups and downs of life. There are times when I'm really down in a hole, and there are times when, I'm floating on a cloud. But remember, God wants us to be able to commune with him. He wants us to understand that he is in control. There is a plan, and that he wants to help us navigate those paths in life. Take a left or the right or straight ahead. But whatever, he wants us to also be able to navigate our emotional paths in life. And so that's what that's saying. He's going to do that for us if we make him the number one consideration. If we consult him on everything that we do, then he has promised to do that. Verse 7, don't be conceited about your own wisdom, but fear Adonai and turn from evil. And I'll just say this, and I kind of hit on it earlier. Failure to trust God is to be conceited about our own knowledge. Respect and revere God and don't do evil. Do what he says. Respect him, revere him. But this is the point at which many people fall victim to, and that is trying to rationalize God according to human standards. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So if we consider that our knowledge is superior and God has to meet our hurdles to be considered, then we're off the wrong path. We're on the wrong path. Verse 8. Now this is really an interesting one, and explains why I like to use different verses. And so don't be conceited about your own wisdom. Fear God and turn from evil. This will bring health to your body and give strength to your bones. Now, interesting thing is, if you look at the Jewish Torah, the translation of that says, and will give marrow, strength to your bones, or it will marrow to thy bones. It will give strength to the marrow to thy bones. Now, what that means is, if you know anybody's had leukemia, you know it's a disease of the marrow of the bones. Now, you also know that without the marrow is the blood cell factory of the body. It produces all the cells that pick up our oxygen and send it throughout various parts of our body. It produces the white cells to combat infection and viruses of very all sorts. So if the marrow is infected. If it's unhealthy, we die. That is really, to me, it's not just give strength to your bones. It'll heal you. It'll keep you. So it's much, much more dramatic. And this is something that is seen as you look at the different versions. So verse 9, this is pretty simple. Honor Adonai with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your income. Now, first fruits of all your income, to me, that means what comes in, all your income is gross, not net. And we all know what tithe is, so I won't spend any more time on that particular one. 10, then your granaries will be filled and your vats overflow with new wine. Now, this is, again, where I found some interesting different words. If we look at the Torah, it says, vats will overflow with new wine, but they shall burst, and it says, shall burst out with new wine. So instead of overflow with new wine, it says, shall burst out with new wine, which is lots more dramatic. It's a lot more impact than just overflowing. I mean, it just so much that it bursts out. Tells you how abundant your blessings will be. Very, very a different way of looking at it. Verse 11, my son, don't despise Adonai's discipline or resent his reproof. You know, it's hard to accept correction. I'll admit that. You know, I'm an old guy, but there's not a time in life probably when I've had to be corrected. It hadn't been hard for me. Sometimes it hurts and humiliates us. But what we have here is God saying to us, don't begrudge when I correct you. Don't be angry at me. I love you, and I'm correcting you for a reason. And if you look at it like his correction is a sign of his love for us, it makes it easier to take. Makes it easier. You know, we're just humans. We're stubborn. We're kind of like mules. You know, sheep led astray. You know, I mean, all those things you hear, and it's hard to take correction. But we need to learn from it. We need to appreciate it and be grateful. We need to accept it graciously. We need to admit when we have violated God's commandments, and then accept that correction and then make amends if that violation has involved other people. We need to do that. We don't have a choice. That's what we're required to do. And verse 12 is kind of leading us to the conclusion of these 12 verses. For Adonai corrects those he loves, like a father who delights in his son. And I would tell you that a father who does not care, does not take the time or effort to bother with correction, is a father that probably really doesn't love you. I mean, that's, again, a general statement, but I think that's probably pretty accurate. Godly parents delight in their children following God's laws. And we delight in our children and grandchildren's lives when they follow God. We delight in that. But you know what? So does our Father. Our Heavenly Father delights in seeing all of his children being communion with him, doing what he wants us to do. And that's really what we're talking about here is if we follow God's commandments, then we're going to walk with him. Our days are going to be full. Our difficulties he's going to assist us with. He's going to point us in the right direction. And he's going to delight in us. And we'll delight in him. So with that, I just want to say that the events of this last week are troubling, but just remember that, the creator of the universe, the creator of everything that was, is, or will be, has it in control. He has our interest at heart. He loves us. And this too shall pass. So thank you for listening, and I wish each of you to experience God's shalom in the week ahead. Thank you.